If you've got a Game Boy Pocket or a Game Boy Color and the speaker's not working, this video is for you. I'm going to be explaining all about the headphone jack, how to test the speaker, and how to make sure the audio amp chip is actually sending the audio to the speaker and the headphone jack. And there's a little bit about checking the CPU as well later on in the video. So I hope you find it useful. If you've got any comments or questions, let us know in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe. So the first thing we can do, we can look at the headphone jack. The headphone jack acts like a switch. When you plug the headphones in, it disconnects the speaker. So if this is dirty and it thinks there's a pair of headphones in, you're not going to get any audio out of your speaker. You can see the switch open as I put in the jack plug there. So if that's corroded, it'll think there's a pair of headphones in and it won't send audio to the speaker. So put your headphones in and try and clean that little switch there with some contact cleaner. You can use a multimeter in continuity mode. You can test from there to there to make sure you've got continuity. Or you can flip the board over and test from pin 4 to pin 5. And that shows you that that switch is actually closed and it's working okay. If that's clean and it's working okay, you can test the speaker. Put your multimeter in ohms resistance mode with the ohm symbol there. A good speaker should have around 8 ohms. So you can check from there to there. And I've got 8.7 ohms, 8.6. So the speaker's working. If you don't get around 8.6 ohms, or the ohms are in the mega ohms, you'll have to replace that speaker. That's quite a simple task, but you'll need a solder and iron. Now, what happens if the switch is clean and you have continuity from pin 4 to 5 and your speaker seems to be okay because you've got around 8 ohms of resistance? You've got to start looking at this little amplifier chip up here and how it connects to the headphone jack. So the little amplifier here, count from pin 1, which is the circle, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Pin 6 here goes all the way down to pin 5 on the headphone jack. It goes through the headphone jack to ground. Let's have a look at the schematic here. So the signal comes out of pin 6 and it goes to pin 5 on the audio jack, through the clean audio jack and out of pin 4 to ground. So from pin 6 to ground, I use this little external connector casing. That has actually checked everything from here through the wires all the way down the board to pin 5, to pin 4 and then to ground. So you need to double check that you've got continuity from pin 6 down to pin 5. And if you haven't got continuity from pin 6 to pin 5, it'll be a problem with the wires. So it goes to this one, and then if you flip the board over to here, down to SW for switch, but then unfortunately the rest of it is underneath there, and I think it could be that one, and it is. So it's actually that one there, and there's a little trace coming out the bottom, and it comes underneath the game slot. It comes down to pin 5. So like I say, if you're not connected from pin 6 to pin 5 down here, it is this little section here, and from there down to there. So the speaker connects to pin 3 on the amp, and it comes from pin 3 straight to the speaker at number 1 there, and the other side of the speaker comes to capacitor 31. So that's quite easy to check. Pin 3 goes to that wire there. If I move the board down, I've lost my speaker, but it comes down to the top one, and the bottom one comes to C31 here at the top. So I should have a connection from this bottom speaker contact to the capacitor, and I do. And then from there it goes to ground, from the capacitor to ground, and I'll use the battery terminal. So that's how you check from pin 3 at the top here down to the top contact on that speaker. So on the board, the speaker comes out to pin 3 to this wire here, which is this one, and then it comes down to here, which is actually, well, that ends up right underneath the gain slot there. So if you have signs of corrosion on that wire there and your speaker's not working, you can either take that off, or you might just have to put a small trace wire from there round here and try and pick it up on the appropriate trace, scrape some of that back. I should point out that it's possible this chip isn't getting the voltage that it needs to turn on. You can check that because it takes its voltage directly from pin C on the on-off switch. So continuity on there, and the voltage comes in on pin 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is this one. So we've got continuity there, and also on pin 14, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, which is that one. So just double check that you've got voltage or a connection from C on your switch to pin 4, I think I said, and 14, and that makes sure that that chip is getting power. So let's look at the audio before it gets to the amp. You can see it comes from the volume wheel to pin 7 and 8, and there's a couple of handy test points we can check. So we know that the audio comes into the amp on pins 7 and 8 from the volume wheel here. So we can actually put a game in and let the game run and test to see if we've got audio on those two pins. But we can't do it on this side of the board, because when we put a game in, that'll be covered up. If we flip the board over, we'll have some test points for L in and R in. Now these are coming between the volume wheel and that chip. So we're going to probe them with an external speaker to see if they produce any audio. And to do that, I'm going to use a little audio probe that I've made up and an external speaker. So I'm going to pop a game in. I'm going to power the board up with a little external power supply. You can use batteries if you can hook them up to the battery pads. I'm going to hook my audio probe up to ground. and the tip is positive, and I'm going to plug that in to an external speaker. So now all we've got to do is switch on and wait for the audio to start. Right, there we go. Left and right. Right. So right is a little bit quieter than left, which has probably got something to do with the volume wheel, because the volume wheel has got a left and a right channel. So the right channel might be slightly corroded. I can test the audio going into the volume wheel with the pins underneath, but it's really loud. Yeah, that's really loud, but they both sound the same volume wise. So the speaker is perhaps slightly corroded on the right hand side there, but it's not enough to cause a problem. So we've now tested 4 test points before and after the volume wheel. Right, what's next? Let's see if we can find out where the audio comes out of the main chip and see if we can trace it from the main chip to the audio amp. So looking at the schematic here, the audio comes from the main chip on SO1 and SO2. So if we scroll up to the main chip, you can see in this section SO1 and SO2 on pin 27 and 28, and there's also a test point SO1 and SO2. That goes off to the analog audio section there where we've just came from. So we're on pin 27 and 28 as right and left audio out. That's on the main CPU. So on this main chip here, we've got 24 pins along the bottom, starting at the arrow and pin 1. So 24, so this is 25, 26, 27 and 28. So they are your audio chips, your audio out from the CPU. And they go to SO1 and SO2. So we can test it. We'll kind of test it on this side of the board because we need a game in, but we can test to make sure it's coming out of SO1 and SO2. You would only be testing these to try to find out if you had a break in a trace somewhere. You can start off at the source and follow it through the board and try to find out where the break is. But we'll just double check my information, otherwise I'm going to look like an idiot. We'll switch on and we'll go to SO2. There's the beep. We'll switch off and we'll go to SO1, which is there. And there's the beep. I'll turn that down because it's really loud. So you know for sure if you want to start at the source and work your way backwards, but that's quite in depth. Normally a clean out of here, clean your jack out, fixes a lot of it, but then the next one is the traces from the audio amp, because you get a bit of corrosion underneath the cartridge slot. But that's just showing you a really in-depth way of checking the speaker and the audio from the main CPU. I don't know what else I can add to the video If you can think of something and I've missed something out, I'd greatly appreciate it if you left a comment on it. Now this is for the Game Boy Pocket, but the Game Boy Color is very similar. I'm sure it's still the same pin 6 coming out of the audio amp there. So the Pocket and the Color are pretty much the same process. Have a look at the schematics. But I think that's as far as I can go. That's about the depth of my knowledge on tracing the audio on these boards. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Like I say, if you can add to it, please do. And I hope to see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.